When the car accident happened, I dialed Aidan Dalton's number for help. But the only response I got was the man's grunt and a woman's moan. Aidan's tone was impatient. "Lori Calnan, what are you fussing about again?" Later, despite the rescue efforts, I died, but he collapsed in front of my corpse, face pale, body trembling. "Can we go back to the day you said you liked me?" I left him decisively. When I opened my eyes again, standing in front of me was the 18-year-old Aidan Dalton, blushing as he confessed to me. Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. I died, in a very ugly way, thrown several meters by a car, bloodied and mangled. When Aidan arrived, he saw the usually clean and pretty Lori Calnan in her only undignified state. He couldn't smile. Outside, he didn't believe I was dead, and like a madman, he beat the driver half to death. He was no longer the calm and composed person he used to be, raging and cursing at all the doctors trying to save me outside the emergency room. My best friend, Elaine Benson, couldn't bear the grief and slapped him awake. "Aidan Dalton, can't you let Lori rest in peace even after her death?" Aidan seemed to be stimulated, collapsing against the wall. Finally, he staggered in and knelt before my corpse. "Lori." His eyes were red as he gently called my name, as if afraid to disturb a sleeping person. "Don't scare me, be good, wake up and look at me." "Lori, I'm here, I'm late, it's my fault, get up and scold me, will you?" I couldn't wake up. I was dead, completely dead, and my soul was watching this farce from above. I didn't understand, what was the point of Aidan's current sickly and sorrowful appearance? When the accident happened, I had used my last bit of strength to call Aidan. But he was busy with his new lover, and the only responses I got were his grunts and her moans. I forced myself. "It hurts, Aidan, it hurts so much." There was a moment of silence on the other end, then his impatient voice came through the receiver. "Lori Calnan, what are you fussing about again?" Fussing? From beginning to end, I never fussed, and Aidan never took it seriously. Lying in a pool of blood, the pain in my heart, like thousands of needles, hurt more than the physical pain. We had been together for 12 years, when did Aidan and I drift apart? I didn't want to think about it, nor did I want to remember. The man leaned on my bedside, his hand holding mine trembling. "I once heard that after a person dies, the whole world starts to love you." I used to be skeptical, but now I believe it. Aidan was apologizing, saying he was wrong, saying sorry, repenting, and shedding tears. Finally, he stubbornly pressed his cheek against my cold, stiff hand. "Lori." The man choked up, his voice filled with uncontrollable sorrow. "Can we go back to the day you said you liked me? Do you only realize you love someone after they're dead? We can't go back." What responded to him was my decisively departing soul. I thought what awaited me would be a new reincarnation. But when I opened my eyes again, standing in front of me was the 18-year-old Aidan Dalton. "I don't agree." Raising my eyes again, I interrupted the surrounding noisy jeers and took a step back, rejecting the young man's grand confession. In the private room, I uttered a response that left everyone present utterly shocked. "Lori?" 18-year-old Aidan furrowed his brow, looking over in disbelief. I completely stepped out of the heart shape arranged with flower petals by the young man, and calmly said, "I'm very busy, Aidan Dalton, you know that. I don't have time for a relationship." "Don't have time?" The man's face turned cold, and the 3 pages of love letters he had meticulously written instantly fell to the ground. "Are you freaking kidding me?" Faced with his questioning, I remained silent. 18-year-old Aidan, high-spirited, proud, and willful, with a young master's temper, was easily provoked. He said fine 3 times, tore up the love letter, and stared at me fiercely, as if trying to tear me apart with his gaze. This was Aidan's first confession, meticulously prepared for more than half a month, yet it was thoroughly rejected in an instant. This person was his always clingy little follower, Lori Calnan. Everyone was whispering, and Aidan finally kicked the nearby coffee table hard and stormed out, slamming the door. In the reflective fragments, what was reflected was the tender, immature face of an 18-year-old girl. I did not enter the cycle of reincarnation. I was reborn in the year Aidan loved me the most, but the painful memories were not forgotten. So, in this confession that confirmed the relationship and caused entanglement, the 30-year-old me resolutely went against the heart of my 18-year-old self. 18 was the most painful year of my life. My family went bankrupt, my father went to prison, my mother fell from a building. And I, once a pampered young lady, fell into the mud, stripped of my luxurious clothes, and left with no relatives, bearing huge debts. Becoming the most pitiful joke avoided by everyone in the circle. I lay on the bed, carefully recalling the past year. With a click, it was the sound of my parents coming home. The old apartment we had just moved into did not have the sound insulation of our previous big villa. I could hear their faint movements. Lori is asleep, let's be quiet so we don't wake her. The two of them quietly changed their shoes and sat on the sofa, huddling together for warmth. After a while, I could hear my mother's soft sobs. Paul, the company is still short of funds, what are we going to do? Today, they had looked for everyone they could, but no one was willing to invest and help them. Betrayed by trusted associates, the unprecedented huge change left the Calnan family's company on the brink of collapse. My father seemed to age several decades in an instant. His heart was also bleeding, but as the pillar of the family, he had to swallow his pain to protect his beloved wife and daughter. He told my mother that he had a way, that it was no big deal, that in all these years, he, Paul Calnan, had seen all kinds of storms. He told me, sweetheart, the big villa is being renovated. For now, you'll have to make do with this small room. He said that later, he would buy me a bigger room and a more beautiful walk-in closet. But when there was no one around, he would silently smoke one cigarette after another. The couple huddled together outside, while separated by a door. I, reborn, silently shed tears. In my previous life, I had been kept in the dark, the pain of having no relatives still vivid in my memory. In this life, I clenched my fists, vowing never to repeat the same mistakes. After the college entrance exam, I found a part-time job at a restaurant. In my previous life, I never noticed the difficulties at home. When I first confirmed my relationship with my crush, I still thought I was a young lady, traveling the world with Aidan during summer vacation. In this life, while I was busy working in the restaurant, holding the hard-earned money, I felt more grounded than ever before. Perhaps bad karma is always so dramatic. One day, while serving drinks and dishes, I heard someone exclaim, "Lori Calnan? What are you doing here?" When my name was called out, the lively atmosphere in the private room instantly quieted down. At the far end, a young man in a black hoodie and a baseball cap, who had been sleeping, fluttered his eyelashes. His lazy fingers on the sofa also unconsciously twitched. This was the first time I saw Aidan since I rejected his confession. He slightly lowered his chin, his facial lines more defined, his eyelids lazily drooping. He woke up, glanced at me, and then dropped his head again. Aidan didn't speak, and no one dared to make a sound. I pressed my lips together, just about to leave, but then I heard the man's hoarse voice. "What happened to your hand?" My right hand was still burning with pain from a burn I got while serving a dish. I didn't respond to his question, just continued introducing the dishes one by one. Squirrel fish, jade shrimp, braised shark fin, kung pao chicken. In the entire room, only my voice was heard. After introducing the dishes, I smiled politely and said, "Please enjoy." Then I gently closed the door to the private room. A fallen phoenix is not as good as a chicken. Once a famous young lady, now serving tea and water to them. Even without saying a word, the size and the eyes of those rich second-generation kids said it all. After getting off work at 11 o'clock, just as I stepped out of the restaurant, someone blocked my way and yanked me aside. The young man's fist slammed against the wall, and in front of me was Aidan with red eyes. He looked like an angry little lion who couldn't do anything about me. Under the streetlight, the young man was treating my burn, gritting his teeth. "Lori, keep acting up. You know I care about you and can't do anything about it." Looking at his youthful face, I suddenly thought of the 30-year-old Aidan. The man who loved to say coldly, "Lori Calnan, what are you fussing about again?" My heart trembled, feeling torn apart. In this rebirth, I was determined to draw a clear line with Aidan. So I pulled my hand back and stood up coldly. "Aidan Dalton, we're not even dating. Why are you talking like a resentful woman?" The young man paused, his temples throbbing. "Lori, you used to chase after me every day, teasing and provoking me. Now that you have me, you reject me? He was confused, irritably kicking a stone by the roadside, mumbling to himself. Is it because of your family's situation? But you know, I don't care about that. I only care about you. You don't have money, but I do. I'll take good care of you. I'm the only one by your side. To put it bluntly, I'm your dog, Lori. Before I confessed, we were fine. Why did you suddenly ignore me after I confessed? He was drunk, saying a lot, and finally, he held my hand tightly. In front of me, the 18-year-old Aidan was almost choking as he asked. Lori, you little heartless thing. What did I do wrong? Tell me. At that moment, Aidan was perfect in every way. The young man was straightforward and generous, always openly expressing his love. I couldn't deny that even after being hurt by the 30-year-old Aidan, seeing the 18-year-old him still stirred my heart. In the end, I sighed, patting his head. Aidan, you did well. But we're really not suitable for each other. I thought my honesty would shatter Aidan's pride. But the next day, he appeared in front of me again. He sneered, saying he didn't believe it. He had someone calculated. Aidan Dalton and Lori Calnan were a perfect match and would be happy in the future. What kind of charlatan said that? Sorry, I also had it calculated. It said we wouldn't be happy. You'll fall in love with someone else, and I'll die. I didn't say the last word because I felt the person in front of me was about to lose it. Lori, don't insult me. Aidan's face turned red with anger, gritting his teeth as he approached me. Chastity is a man's best dowry. I won't fall in love with anyone else. You're enough for me to pamper. Yes, yes. But the 30-year-old Aidan completely forgot this principle. The more I thought about it, the more annoyed I became, telling him to leave. Aidan's face looked terrible, but he wouldn't move an inch. For several days in a row, he waited for me at the restaurant door after work. At first, I would chase him away, but later I realized he looked good, and standing at the restaurant door attracted customers, so I didn't bother. After the early shift, he drove his Bentley in front of me, raising his chin, pretending to be proud. Lori, get in the car, I'll take you home on my way. His house and mine were in opposite directions, more than 10 kilometers apart. How could Aidan say it was on his way? I ignored him. When the bus arrived, I got on. He hurriedly got off his car and squeezed in with me. The bus was crowded like a can of sardines, mixed with an indescribable smell of sweat. Aidan had a cleanliness obsession and clearly frowned. I did it on purpose, hoping he would back off and get off the bus. But the young man firmly held me in a spacious spot, the fresh scent of his clothes filling my nose. Next to my ear, Aidan was cursing someone. Idiot, can you stand properly? Why squeeze? If you don't want your hand, you can cut it off. The man who had intentionally or unintentionally touched my thigh turned pale instantly. The 18-year-old Aidan was quite wild. He would break rules for me repeatedly. In my past life, he would shove someone's head into a toilet if they called me a bitch. He would race cars at high speeds on mountain tops, and at the moment of victory, he would shout my name proudly into the camera. He would temper his bad temper for me, and though surrounded by many, he would only bow down to me. My thoughts were drifting. After getting out of the car, Aidan was hitting the thug who touched my thigh in the car. It wasn't until my tears fell onto the back of his hand that he seemed to regain his senses, his Adam's apple bobbing as he gently wiped away my tears. Why are you crying? He cupped the back of my head, pressing his forehead to mine. I continued to cry, and he suddenly deflated, at a loss, no longer showing any hint of his usual cold and cool demeanor. Lori, I won't hit anymore, please don't cry, it's my fault. Aidan hugged me to his chest, coaxing me in a gentle voice. Crybaby, stop crying, you're breaking my heart. It was him at 18 who told me not to cry, and him at 30 who made me cry all the time. Time seemed to change a lot of things. I cried enough, as if I shed all the tears of my 30-year-old self again. When I looked up, I couldn't help it and slapped him across the face. Who would have thought that this wonderful person in front of me would turn into a heartless bastard 12 years later? This was probably the first time in Aidan's arrogant 18 years that he was slapped. He instinctively darkened his eyes, looked up at me, but then hooked his lips into a playful smile. Go ahead, hit me. Once you're happy, don't be mad at me anymore. That day, Aidan was the one who took me home. Before he left, his eyes were bright, but he pretended to be casual and nonchalant. Lori, I have a race at South Mountain tomorrow. You're coming to watch, right? I wouldn't. The race was at 6, and by 8, when it ended, I was still at home. Aidan sent me a lot of messages, but I didn't reply. The young heart suddenly turned gloomy. That night, it poured heavily. At 10:30, I lay in bed, listening to the thunder and rain, when another message from Aidan came. Lori, I'm downstairs at your place. I looked out through the torn window paper and saw a figure standing below. The bone-chilling rain of early autumn seeped into him, yet he seemed unaware. Aidan continued to send messages. If you don't come down, I'll keep waiting. Go ahead and wait. After all, my 30-year-old self had waited for him plenty of times. What a fool. I cursed, biting my lip as I watched the time pass for an hour. Suddenly, there was the sound of something heavy falling downstairs, and my heart tightened. I quickly grabbed my rain gear and rushed down amid my parents' exclamations. Well, what's done is done. There's no need to torment the 18-year-old Aidan for the mistakes of the 30-year-old Aidan. When I got downstairs, Aidan had just gotten up. He already had a cold, and now soaked in the rain, he slipped and fell. The umbrella over his head was just like the countless rainy seasons he had shielded me from when he was 18. Seeing me, Aidan trembled, tears quickly welling up in his eyes. In my exclamation, he hugged me tightly, as if he wanted to merge me into his bones. Lori. My brow twitched, a familiar yet long-lost feeling washed over me. The usually clear and bright eyes of the person in front of me were now covered with a layer of fog that I couldn't see through. The man's voice was hoarse and obsessive. I missed you so much. My whole body was cold because the young man was no longer there. The Aidan in front of me didn't love me. This was the 30-year-old Aidan. The umbrella fell to the ground, and I was pressed into the man's chest, my face turning pale. Lori, I finally returned to this day. I'm so happy, you're still okay, we can start over. Aidan suppressed his joy, wanting to kiss my cheek tenderly, but I slapped him away. With full force, my hand went numb from the shock, but I felt incredibly relieved. Aidan Dalton, don't be a jerk. Aidan's face darkened, and he grabbed my chin, kissing me forcefully. This was the 30-year-old Aidan, who had been in power for a long time, always domineering, overbearing, and not to be contradicted. Unwilling to show weakness, I bit down hard, and the taste of blood quickly spread in my mouth. Pain and suffering intertwined, sending a chill through my heart. Lori. In the end, Aidan closed his eyes bitterly. It's my fault. That day when I returned home, I had a nightmare. I dreamed of the year I turned 30. Aidan was leaning against the car, with a charming girl beside him, acting coy. The way they looked at each other, the restraint and tenderness in his eyes. 12 years, at that moment, just one look, and I knew Aidan and I were drifting apart. The next day, Aidan got up early. This man who always remained calm even when signing billion-dollar contracts, now looked like a young boy in love for the first time. Clumsily choosing the suit that suited him best, applying hair gel, even spraying cologne, nervously waiting at the door for his beloved. Then, with full anticipation, he handed over the breakfast that he had queued for an hour to buy. Lori, this is your favorite breakfast. That was in the past. I stepped back coldly. I don't like it anymore. Aidan's smile froze on his face. You don't like this breakfast anymore? I can get it from somewhere else tomorrow. Aidan, stop playing dumb. Having caught a cold from being in the rain with him yesterday, my head was throbbing, and I impatiently waved my hand to interrupt him. If you really want me to be well, then don't appear in front of me again. I didn't know what was wrong with him. I might have had some leniency for the 18-year-old Aidan, but for the 30-year-old Aidan, I had only disgust left. Aidan's passion was doused with cold water. After a moment of silence, he almost pleaded earnestly. Lori, everyone makes mistakes. You have to give me a chance. A chance? I had given him chances, but unfortunately, they had all disappeared during those countless nights he didn't come home. Aidan was determined to ask for a chance. He bought the restaurant where I worked, spending money to buy my working hours. The man who used to always claim to be busy now turned into a persistent shadow behind me. I went from being indifferent to completely heartless. Whatever Aidan bought for me, I turned around and sold it brand new, shutting him out without any mercy. At the beginning of August, my best friend Elaine Benson returned home early. At the airport, the young girl hugged me and started shedding tears. "My Lori, why have you lost so much weight?" At the Benson family home, we had a heart-to-heart talk, and she asked about Aidan and me. "After so many years, how could you suddenly stop liking him?" "Aidan, I could see it in his eyes, he was crazy about you. Before I went abroad, he even promised to take good care of you. How did things end up like this between you?" "Yeah. But true feelings can change in an instant." I shrugged, lightly sipping a glass of wine. At 18, he did passionately love me, but 12 years later, he loved someone else just as much. The wounds I suffered, the pain I tasted, I couldn't let go. Coming to the Benson household this time, I had a serious matter to attend to. I remembered that this year, there was a financial storm that caused the stock market to plummet, heavily affecting many leading companies. The Calnan family business completely collapsed during this sudden crisis. This time, I had to find a way out and change the outcome of my previous life. I approached Richie Benson, Elaine's brother, and the decisive leader of the Benson family. I needed to convince him to acquire the King family's Southwest textile factory and buy some stocks that would rebound from this crisis. In this financial crisis, I planned to leverage the information gap to turn the tide, and the Benson family would be my best support. "Lori, what you're talking about are the least promising investments right now." Richie crossed his long legs, propped his head up, and looked at me inquisitively. "Yes." This body was only 18 years old, so naturally, whatever I said lacked credibility. I took a deep breath and tightly clutched the hem of my skirt. "Richie, this is our Calnan family's last bargaining chip. Even though it sounds absurd, I, Lori Calnan, would never harm the Benson family. Just give me a chance, and we can turn the tide. The Calnan family will have hope too." The scenes of my family's downfall in my previous life were vivid in my mind, and I couldn't help but tear up. Richie fell silent. The once pampered little flower of the Calnan family, whom he had watched grow up, had undergone a complete transformation overnight due to the crisis. The crisis had made her abandon her arrogance and become more composed and steady. "Why are you crying?" After a long while, Richie laughed, reached out, and squatted down to wipe my tears. "I never said I didn't believe you." Although my reasons were flimsy, the Benson family's habitually strategic man decided to take a bold gamble for the first time. When I walked out, my legs were still weak, and I couldn't believe it. Even though I was sure this investment would turn around, to someone who didn't know the future, losing millions in the blink of an eye was daunting. Richie drove me home, and on the way, he suddenly spoke. "Elaine said you and Aidan have been arguing recently? Aidan really doesn't know how to cherish his little girlfriend, making our Lori angry again." Richie was 8 years older than us and familiar with the few younger ones in our families. "We didn't argue." I looked out the window, expressionless. "Aidan Dalton and I are not dating." "I see." Richie's lips curled up slightly, and he changed the topic. "Aidan, I've watched him grow up. He's not quite up to par as a boyfriend." As soon as I got out of Richie's car, I saw Aidan standing across the street, his eyes dark and stormy. Aidan gritted his teeth with a cold expression. He was no longer the naive 18-year-old Aidan. That bastard Richie, always playing the role of the neighborly big brother, had been coveting his Lori. For the next few years, this so-called brother would often try to steal her away. "Lori, why did you go to Richie?" Lori hadn't spoken to him kindly for a long time, so why did Richie get her good face? Aidan's eyes were icy as he grabbed my shoulders forcefully. What was wrong with him? I remembered that he used to be so close to Richie, always calling him buddy. I was baffled and retorted, my gaze mocking. "Aidan, what right do you have to control me? What are you to me? Your husband." Aidan was completely furious, pressing me down and growling. "Lori, you are my legally wedded wife." As he spoke, the plain ring hanging around his neck was revealed. It was the ring we bought in Finland during our world trip when we were 18. Back then, we still liked each other, promised forever and engraved each other's names on the inner ring. At some point, Aidan had someone buy it back. Why bother, Aidan? Didn't you lose this ring in the sewer long ago? I coldly pushed him away, and his face turned deathly pale. At 30, he met a girl who was more gentle, prettier, and cuter than me, with eyes that reminded him of the stubborn young me. He lost the ring when he went to pick up that girl. The ring fell from his pocket and rolled into the sewer without a sound. He was too focused on the drunk girl in his arms to notice the lost ring. Later, I listened to his explanations in silence, feeling like my heart was being cut with a knife. Aidan, back then, I wanted to ask you. Why did you take off the ring? When you took off the ring, were you thinking about her or me, waiting at home for you? Lori, it's not like that. I found it later. After you left, I turned that sewer upside down. Fortunately, someone picked it up, and it wasn't lost. I was wrong, Lori. The man deflated, babbling frantically, carefully placing the ring in front of me. Look at it. Aidan. I had completely lost my patience. Not every apology deserves forgiveness. Don't make me feel disgusted. I casually threw the ring into the artificial lake behind the road, just like he had carelessly lost it back then. Aidan closed his eyes in pain. When I slammed the door shut, I heard him stumbling into the lake. For several days afterwards, I didn't see Aidan again. The peaceful days didn't last long before new neighbors moved in next door. In my previous life, I was busy traveling and never met this family next door. But I vaguely remember my mother mentioning that the child in this family was quite pitiful. She was the same age as me, with a father who was an alcoholic and a gambler, and a mother who ran away after having an affair, leaving the little girl at home to be beaten and scolded. The little girl had long, straight black hair, a sallow face, and slender butterfly bones that seemed ready to take flight. Only her eyes were different, dark, bright, and full of an unextinguishable light. She did resemble me in some ways. I couldn't help but marvel at how small the world was. Tara, Aidan's little mistress when he was 30, had actually passed through my life 12 years ago. 30-year-old Aidan was smitten with her at first sight, showering her with affection and adoration. Now, in this timeline, I suddenly became curious about how a 30-year-old Aidan's soul would react upon meeting an 18-year-old Tara. At the end of August, on my birthday, my best friend Elaine went all out to throw a big party. Aidan came uninvited, showering the place with expensive gifts but didn't step inside, only daring to text me from outside the private room. Happy birthday, Lori. He didn't come inside to annoy me, lighting a cigarette at the door and just about to leave when he turned around and was bumped into by a clumsy waiter. A drink spilled on his expensive coat, the young girl's face turned pale with fright, and she hurriedly tried to wipe it off. Sir, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, sir. Aidan was already irritated and was about to curse when the words got stuck in his throat. Tara, with her thin skin, couldn't stand being stared at by this handsome young man. Her ears turned red. Sir, it's my responsibility for the coat. Could you please take it off? I can help you get it dry cleaned. I leaned against the door, slowly enjoying this drama. I heard that 30-year-old Aidan first met Tara in a similar situation. After a few seconds of silence, Aidan coldly pushed her away. Get lost. His intense gaze looked over, seeing only me. Aren't you two going to catch up? As he couldn't help but step closer to me, I smiled and maintained a safe distance. Don't you like her a lot? I wish you both happiness in advance. How could that be, Lori? Aidan frowned, hurriedly explaining. I didn't expect her to be here. I won't have any more contact with her. Who wanted his promises anyway? I frowned, not having time to speak before he pulled me to the car. He somehow produced a cake from somewhere. On the cake, a poorly made SpongeBob grinned foolishly. The clumsy craftsmanship made it obvious who had made it. Aidan's voice was very soft, carefully watching my reaction. Once again, he sincerely wished me well. May you have peace and happiness forever, Lori. Peace and happiness forever. In this world, the one least qualified to wish me that was Aidan Dalton. The fear of death from my previous life swept over me once again. When I opened my eyes again, the cake had already been heartlessly knocked to the ground. I immediately issued an eviction order. Get out. Lori. Aidan didn't move. He lowered his head and covered his eyes, his voice trembling. You can't treat me like this. Why should I bear the consequences of what he did? I was taken aback, only then realizing something was wrong. Aidan was crying. The young man, with reddened eyes, was trying hard to suppress the bitterness inside. He is not me, Lori. I would never treat you like that. 18-year-old Aidan felt like he was going crazy. After losing consciousness in the heavy rain and waking up again, he had an additional memory in his mind. In that memory, he was a complete jerk at 30. Untrustworthy, heartless, and had long since discarded love. He had done many despicable things to Lori, whom he always cherished. Every single act, every word he had said, suffocated him and made him afraid to see me. 30-year-old Aidan had once written me a farewell letter. At that time, he was deeply involved with Tara, who kept pestering him for a status. During a drunken interview, a reporter asked him what he most wanted to do. By some freakish chance, he revealed his true feelings on camera, and then wrote me a farewell letter saying goodbye. The next day, he left me, besieged by public opinion, and accompanied Tara to the UK to watch a musical. It was too absurd. How could he have done such a thing? I couldn't write a farewell letter, nor do I want to say goodbye to you. That couldn't have been me. 18-year-old Aidan's throat was dry and bitter, and tears instantly welled up. Don't you dare wish me happiness with another woman. Lori, without you, I could never be happy. On the bustling street, it was Aidan holding me and crying. The young man's heart felt as if a piece had been gouged out, the pain making his tears fall. This was the second time I had seen Aidan cry. The first time was in my previous life, after my mother jumped off a building, and I, emotionally shattered, developed depression and hurt myself. Aidan trembled as he snatched the knife from my hand. The blade cut his palm, blood flowing everywhere, but he didn't seem to notice. Lori. Aidan held me tightly, his voice torn, his heart in pain. You still have me, Lori, you still have me. I will always be with you. Now, it was the second time. He abandoned his cold demeanor, his tears breaking free, unwilling to believe the infidelity of his past life. No one will always love someone, and no one can always be with someone. Love is not guaranteed. Love was real, and change was also real. This was the message 30-year-old Aidan had given me. Now, I returned it verbatim to 18-year-old Aidan. My death in my previous life was inextricably linked to Aidan. If we hadn't had a big fight, I wouldn't have gone out and had an accident. Aidan, if you really want to do me good. I resolutely pried open the young man's fingers, giving him a sincere smile. Then just go far away. Leave my world forever. Aidan felt a chill in every part of his body. Every word hit his heart, making his scalp tingle and him unable to move. It seemed as if all the tears of his 18 years were going to be shed at this moment. Finally, when he met my indifferent eyes, he seemed to have his bones and soul extracted in an instant. Pain, unwillingness, regret, despair, mixed emotions. After a long time, like a defeated gambler, his voice transparent, he used all his strength to respond dejectedly. Okay. September, the start of the new school year at Q University, I stepped into my alma mater once again. Unlike my previous life, this time, my family and the Benson family joined forces. Seizing the opportunity presented by the financial crisis to turn things around and carve out a path for the Calnan group. The humiliation and suffering I endured in my past life, I swore to make those backstabbing leeches of the Calnan family taste it. I took over the family business, juggling between school and the company, as busy as a spinning top that never stops. Competing for GPA at school, striving for performance at the company. I knew that only by becoming strong could I protect myself and become a shield for my loved ones. On this path of continuous improvement, I also met many like-minded people. My roommate, Linda, was the most inspiring girl I had ever met. Coming from a poor mountainous area, with 5 children in her family, she defied the odds of a male preference upbringing and turned a bad hand into a winning one. She topped the college entrance exams and got into Q University. During an interview, when asked about her motto, the little girl was still planting rice in the fields, reciting famous quotes. Unyielding in the face of wind and rain, cleanse my clothes and feet, and open my heart. When asked for something more down to earth, she said, "If you don't study today, you'll be a housewife tomorrow." She became famous overnight. The new environment drew a boundary line in my life. Aidan went abroad and disappeared from my life. We became like two parallel lines that would never intersect. Life was busy, and I thought we would never have contact again. On Christmas Day, I suddenly received a strange text message. It was a picture of a street lamp in Boston covered in vines. I frowned. Then, an unexpected international call came through. I accidentally answered it. A few seconds later, the first voice from the other end trembled. "Lori." Around me was the festive noise, but on his end, it was a lonely long night. Aidan had opened this number countless times but never dared to dial it. He knew that his future self was despicable and shameless, a scoundrel. His 30-year-old soul constantly fought for control over this body. He could only stay away from Lori, farther and farther, hoping never to meet again. He said he would let go, but his longing turned into a disaster. Finally, with the courage from being drunk, he pressed the call button. After a long silence, he took a deep breath, his mind in a haze. "Lori, Boston has entered winter time. The treetops by Walden Pond are covered with snow. The streets of Rhode Island are adorned with the Christmas bells you like." Aidan rambled on, as if he wanted to share everything he hadn't said during this time. "Aidan." I wearily pinched my brow. "If there's nothing else, hang up." On the foreign street, he stood alone, the cold wind biting. Aidan leaned against the street lamp, motionless, his figure swallowed by the night. After rambling for a long time, just before I hung up, he finally choked out the words he most wanted to say. "Lori Calnan. Winter time is cold and long, and I miss you for no reason." He knew he was a bastard, aware that his past self was disgusting, but the 18-year-old Aidan Dalton still missed Lori Calnan very much. On my birthday the following year, Richie Benson was waiting for me at the door with roses. I'm not a fool. I've noticed and remembered all the kindness Richie has shown me during this time. But I have no expectations for love anymore. Love affects my progress too much. Once again, I refused the roses. Richie smiled bitterly. He and Lori could be the best of friends, the best business partners, but they would never be each other's soulmates. For the convenience of the company, I lived in an apartment outside the school. My best friend, Elaine, also came. When she entered, she found a pair of rings on the mailbox. Under the light, Elaine saw the engraving inside the rings. Aidan and Lori. She was stunned and suddenly remembered someone who hadn't been mentioned for a long time. Aidan? Isn't he abroad? Is he back? Whether he returned or not, it had little to do with me. Rings no longer mattered to me. With love, you can cross mountains and seas. Without love, even a half-hour drive feels like an insurmountable obstacle. Now, Aidan could cross oceans to bring me a ring. But in the past life, he had left me to accompany his little lover. I rested my face in my hand and smiled lightly. It was too late. No broken mirror could be mended, no old dreams could be revisited. Once unfaithful, never again. Once, when negotiating a business deal, I saw Tara again. She was completely different from the image of the long-haired, innocent girl in my memory. She had permed her hair into big waves, wore red lipstick, and was acting coquettishly in the arms of a pot-bellied boss. 30-year-old Aidan thought he was his little lover's only one, but in the end, he was not irreplaceable. When Tara's flattering gaze met mine, it instantly turned cold. "Lori Calnan, you must be very pleased to see me like this, right?" In the restroom, she blocked my way, her beautiful eyes filled with venom. These years, she hadn't lived well, relying only on her looks to please old men. In countless tortured nights, she had seen some memories in her nightmares. In her dreams, she met a man, seduced him to love her, pamper her, protect her, and lived a completely different life. But now, this man avoided her like the plague. Tara felt extremely unbalanced, jealousy blinding her. Since she was young, she had hated the neighboring family. Why, even when Lori's family fell, could she still get so much love easily having loving parents and a loving boyfriend? Why did she have nothing, stuck with a vampire-like family? The precious things Tara cherished were easily obtained by Lori Calnan. Jealousy and twisted feelings darkened her heart. But she never understood that crossing social classes was far from just relying on powerful men. A parasitic life only leads to self-destruction. It's all because of you. Tara's eyes were red. Aidan was supposed to be mine. I should have been a beautiful and respectable wealthy wife. I grabbed her wrist, stopping her from slapping me, my gaze mocking. Relying on a man is the beginning of self-destruction. Having unrealistic fantasies about a man is a grave mistake. Aidan might have had feelings for her, but why didn't he give her a status or divorce me? It was because there were too many interests involved. Eating from the bowl while looking at the pot. A smart woman should use a man as a stepping stone. In the third year after taking over Calnan Group, I negotiated with many of Dalton Group's partners to create more mutually beneficial cooperative relationships with greater profits. Relying on a man can only last for a while, but not for a lifetime. Beauty is a plus, but combining wisdom and ability is the trump card. Unfortunately, Tara didn't understand. Even after being abandoned by her sugar daddy and slapped by his wife, she still didn't realize her mistake. She only thought I had stolen her opportunities and life, wrongfully blaming me for everything. One night, she lost her mind, lured me out, and drove her car towards me. As she stepped on the gas, her mind screamed, kill her, make her suffer again." But just as the car was about to hit, someone pushed me out of the way. When Tara saw who had been hit, she screamed in despair. Protecting Lori was almost Aidan's instinctive reaction. This was his third year silently staying by Lori's side to atone for his sins after returning to the country. He lay quietly in a pool of blood, tears slipping down uncontrollably. "It hurts so much." Was this how Lori felt back then? 30-year-old Aidan didn't treat you well, so the current Aidan would kill himself for you. Aidan never thought he would lie in Lori's arms again, seeing his beloved from this angle. The first time, and also the last time. "Lori, I'm sorry." Knowing his despicable nature, he weakly apologized over and over, finally falling silent as his wrist went limp. A heartless person began to sing of grand love. Perhaps it was true that karma comes around. In my past life, I died because of Aidan. In this life, Aidan died at the height of his love for me. I laughed, but as I laughed, the wind blew sand into my eyes and my tears flowed uncontrollably. The police arrested Tara for attempted murder. Aidan was taken back by his family for burial. Whether it was the Aidan who loved me or the Aidan who didn't love me, the entanglement spanning 2 lives officially ended. Letting go with the wind, the past like smoke, never to be seen again. The following year, I received an invitation to a successful entrepreneur interview program abroad. I embarked on a journey to a foreign country. As the plane reached the clouds, the gates of memory opened, I overlooked the world, and a new life had just begun. To cross mountains, to please oneself, the hibiscus blooms proudly for a day. All tears and pain are written off. Reset, renew, restart, rise. Step into the sunrise, step into brilliance. For the new life ahead, best wishes.